Well, that's about it for me, because I know he's going to take up all of the time that's available and possibly a bit more. This guy here, when he was awarded his Master Photographer with the AIPP, he was the youngest at the time ever. He was only 20 years old. He's a leading master wedding photographer, and in 2012 was the AIPP Wedding Photographer of the Year. He's 3 times been the New South Wales Wedding Photographer of the Year. They asked him to leave. So he went to Queensland. He won that for the last 2 years. So he's probably going to head off to somewhere else soon. Obviously married to the beautiful Jess, and he's got a beautiful daughter, and he'll share all that with you as well. Ryan comes from a family, he's been in the wedding industry, probably just about anyone else in our institute. His father, Ryan, led him into the industry, and he used to wander around as a kid at these sort of functions, and now he is up on stage as one of the stars. His core work is in the wedding market, and he's pretty much shot on about 5 continents and spoken on about 5 continents, I think. Ryan's in demand as a speaker in Asia, Europe, America, Australia, etc. Shoots about 60 weddings a year and has quite an individual style. Recent accolades, I'm not going to go over all of them. He's an honorary life member of the AIPP. He's only, how old are you now, 26 or something?
Thanks, Tone.
That's all right.
Yeah.
He was last year's Australian Wedding Photographer of the Year. In 2014, he won the inaugural WPPI In-Camera Artistry Award. And that means he did it all in his camera. He has had 6 grand awards in the wedding category at WPPI, and a string of other awards to go to boot. 5 times WPPI International Print of the Year. He's a Master Photographer 4 and an Honorary Life Member, as I said. He's a fantastic guy, and I know, girls, he's a good looker too. Make him feel welcome, Mr. Ryan Schembri.
Thank you, buddy. Hey, guys. Am I on? I am on. Can you hear me? Good. Actually, this is I can't believe this is the first time I'm actually speaking on a national level in Australia. It's quite humbling and quite surreal, actually, and I'm still quite nervous. And it's so good that people actually showed up. I was thinking that you'd all be in bed hungover, or hoping anyway, but it was a good night. It was a good night. Actually, I first did this talk over at WPPI this year, so I did it in front of about 1,200 people. So I had a good warm-up. So you guys should actually get the good version of this, which would be really cool. But it all stemmed from actually winning that award at WPPI, the In-Camera Artistry Award. And if you don't know, WPPI have an award where you enter a raw file, and basically they judge it as they would judge any print. They export the raw file with no presets or anything attached to it, and they award it. And I just thought it was a great initiative, and it actually gave me back a lot of passion to be able to get things not only right in camera, but to do things more than people could imagine could be done in camera. And don't get me wrong, this is not a Photoshop bagging session, because in fact, I absolutely love Photoshop. I really do. And I'm going to show you a bit more about that as well. But just to fill you in on what I'm going to be talking about today, the why I switched my mentality over to this more of in-camera artistry feel, my conversation with my friends. I do have a lot of friends and a lot of great people around me that we always talk and try to inspire each other. The how-to, the fundamentals of light, composition, emotion, and pose. The twist, how to twist your brain, basically, to see things that your clients aren't seeing and to impress them. And finally, the finish, and how important that finish is still to all of my images. No great presentation starts without a slideshow, so I thought I should show you that first. So it's a bit of my work over the last couple of years, and then we'll get particularly like those really underexposed black images. They were really good. I don't know what happened there. Lost a couple of images out of the slideshow. So, all right. So the why to this shift of my mentality in this in-camera artistry, and why I believe it was so important for me. I basically felt that my photography was getting very repetitive. I could almost pick what type of images I was going to shoot, at which wedding, at what time of the wedding, and it gets a little bit boring. How many of us are wedding photographers in the room? So a fair few. For those of you who aren't, a lot about what I speak about I reference to weddings today, but I believe it crosses over in a lot of genres of photography, but bear with me while I reference weddings. A wedding is quite repetitive, wouldn't you agree? White dress, black suit, a cake that no one eats, drunk people. You need to be able to do something different all the time to keep yourself entertained. How many of us shoot 50, 60 weddings a year? A couple of us. It really does, it drags you down sometimes to figure, I need to be doing something else, something different, and to stop myself from jumping off the Sydney Harbour Bridge, basically. But I was feeling it was getting too repetitive. I was tired of seeing the same images in weddings. Is anyone getting that feeling at the moment? That weddings are becoming very, very similar, and the look of wedding photography is becoming very similar. In fact, if you look through my Facebook feed at the moment, it basically looks the same day in, day out. Everything looks like it's just come off Instagram, basically. It's square, it's a little bit yellow, or it's HDR'd within an inch of its life. I'm getting tired of seeing that. I wanted to break the mold and do something a little bit different. I knew what was possible in Photoshop. Trust me, if you've seen my work in previous years, you'll know that I'm a big lover of Photoshop, and I'm going to show you some before and afters just to prove that. But I knew it was possible in Photoshop, and I was almost getting to a point where I was very lazy with my photography because I knew I could fix things. And how many of our clients actually say to us, well, you can just fix that later, right? You can just liquefy my arms. Isn't it scary that they actually know the word liquefy? I find that freakish, but they do. They know that things can be done afterwards. My point to them is, well, let me fix it now. Let me make it really beautiful now. Imagine what it could be afterwards then. I knew I was capable of more. And more than that, I love a challenge. Anyone who challenges me to do something, I'll do it, and I'll make sure that I do it to the best of my possible ability. So to prove to you that I love Photoshop, I'm going to show you a couple of things that I did in the past that was making me very lazy. Actually, I'm going to walk around. I need to walk off some energy. So this shot's very interesting because I shot this in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And it was really interesting because it was a Chinese wedding. They were from Hong Kong. They spoke Cantonese. I'm in Buenos Aires in Argentina. All the staff spoke Spanish. And they chose an Australian wedding photographer who speaks none of the above. So the whole day was done with hand signals, basically. It was you, come closer, and kiss. Actually, I found this room, and this room was really interesting, but it didn't really have all this stuff happening. The piano wasn't there. The piano was in a different room. So I said to one of the waiters, would you mind? There's a piano in the other room. Pick it up and bring it in here. They didn't quite pick it up, but it had wheels, so they wheeled it in for me. It's amazing what you get when you ask for it, isn't it? They wheeled it in, and I thought of the shot, and I thought, well, they could be doing their first dance, but then it needed someone playing the piano. The only person I could see around me was the dad. Actually, it's the father of the bride. And he had one of those suits on with, like the tassels at the end of it, the long suit. And he just reminded me of a pianist. He couldn't play the piano. In fact, he tried. I told him to stop. But I said, you need to set a mood. Sing for me. Sing so they can feel that moment. They can dance. He started to sing. I told him to stop because he was a terrible singer. But I ended up getting this shot. It wasn't quite like this, though, when it started. It was more like this. So there was crap gardens, lights. There were disco lights for later on in the night. But I knew what the end image was. and this is what I mean by me getting lazy. I knew what was possible in Photoshop. I knew that I could deep etch each and every one of those windows, all 356 of them, and get that. I knew then that I could get rid of the lights. If I deep etched them, I got rid of them, and then deep etched the couple, the piano, the roof, the floor, the dad playing the piano, I could get this. So from there, we get that. And you might say, Ryan, that's really great. But incredibly lazy. Incredibly lazy. I would do stuff like this as well. I would take a shot like this, and I really loved this shot, but I thought, what if I flipped it? And then I flipped it once more, and then I flipped it again once more. I would end up with something like this. And then I got to this one, and this is probably one of my personal favorites over the last few years. I knew what this shot was about when I took it. I just didn't have all the elements playing out correctly. It's a bit distorted, would you agree? When I said to the bride, would you mind falling on the stairs? I didn't really say that. I said, would you mind laying down on the stairs? When she laid down, what shape do you see in her dress? A heart. The pattern on the floor almost reminded me of like a diamond pattern. I was thinking along the lines of playing cards. What I said to her then was, could you, with your right hand, pretend you're holding a playing card for me? With your left hand, point to your heart. Thinking that the bride was the Queen of Hearts. I left the location and went to the reception, and on the way I stopped at a 7-Eleven and bought a deck of playing cards. So then I could photograph the back of the playing card and put it in her hand afterwards. We ended up here. Are you getting my point? I love Photoshop. I really do. It can do a lot of great things. Would you agree? I wanted more though. I wanted more. And I started having conversations with friends of mine, and friends that love Photoshop too. Actually, you might have heard of this guy. His name's Rocco and Cora. Everyone heard of him? If you haven't, you've been living under a rock. Someday soon, he's going to be a really good wedding photographer as well. Someday soon, yeah. He's only just won the Wedding Photographer of the Year 4 times, but you know, he's okay. He's getting there. I started having conversations with Rock, and we would have almost daily conversations about the same stuff, how depressed we were. We were getting bored of shooting the same stuff, getting the same results. And it was only through those conversations I started to challenge Rock, because Rock's been shooting for a long time. I said to him, well, what if we just mix it up a bit? And the next wedding you shoot, I want you to text me on the day a picture of the back of the camera. And we'll see if we can outdo each other. That led to competition. Now, anyone that knows us knows we love competition. We love entering awards. But even more than that, between us friends, remember, we're best friends. Between myself, Jerry Gionis, Nick Gionis, and Rocco, we started an online competition through Instagram. So we started taking some shots on the day that we thought were brilliant just out of the camera, taking a photograph of the back of the screen and posting it to Instagram. And I would say something like, hey, Rock, beat this one. And he would then post back, take a shot of the back of his screen and go, haha, Ryan, got you covered. Do you know what that would do to me? I'd go, stuff this. I'm going to teach this guy a thing or two, yeah? And I'd keep going, and we'd keep going all day. And we called it #sock, straight out of camera. We've actually built quite a following now. It's pretty impressive. But we do this, and we do this now almost at every wedding. And it's more to keep us entertained than anything else. That last one, actually, I posted to Rock and I said, check out this histogram, bro. Let's see if I can get back there. Yeah. I said, beat this histogram. Yes, we are nerds, really. But it did a few things for me. It did some really great stuff for me. Instagram became instant gratification. Would you agree? We all love Instagram. I would post something, we'd get likes, and you'd feel good. You'd be like, oh my God, people like this, it's great. it did a couple other things. It gave me the opportunity to look for something different to shoot and then share. And not only was I benefiting, but my clients were benefiting from all these amazing images. When I turned the back of the camera to the clients and started showing these images to them, what do you think happened? They would freak out, basically. They'd be like, oh my God, you did this for us? And I'd secretly be like, no. I did it to beat Rocco, but anyway. Yes, of course I did it for you. What are you talking about? It made me want to shoot and share more instantly. And so we had a really cool idea that we're still continuing to work on, but we're going to tell you about it today anyway. We're going to release a website called sockimages.com. And it'll be available soon. And it's going to be a place to learn, create, share, inspire. It's going to be all free. And so everyone around the world will be able to use the hashtag that we create, and it'll all be posted straight to this website, and you'll be able to shoot, share, inspire each other, and hopefully get a bit out of it as well. So keep a lookout for it. That posting instantly to Instagram, though, did a few other things, and more for my business side of stuff as well. And it's only in the last few weeks that I've started to get a grasp of how powerful this was. I did a wedding a few weeks ago, and it was a ridiculous wedding. That gown is by Jeton Couture in Melbourne. It's worth upwards of $50,000. They spent $250,000 on floral arrangements at this wedding. It was ridiculous. I started to feel really cheap. I really did. I was like, I charged these people how much money? Regardless of the fact. What I did on this day is I decided to push myself a little bit further. And as I was shooting, I was Wi-Fiing to my phone. I was then texting the owner of a company called Wedded Wonderland. Has anyone heard of Wedded Wonderland? I was texting her and she was uploading instantly. So as I was shooting at the bride's home, she was uploading to her following. It then got picked up and spread all over the world. We've had 4.5 million impressions and likes in the last week. It's been ridiculous. But I guess where I'm getting to is without my confidence in being able to shoot straight out of the camera, share these instantly, this wouldn't have happened. This wedding was spectacular, granted, but I still needed to make sure that everything was perfect straight out of that camera because we wanted to be able to live feed it to the world. And that's what everyone's after, aren't they? They're after that instant gratification. So Wedded Wonderland, 344,000 people on Instagram saw it, 631,000 on Facebook. I work very closely with some stylists and event planners. Does anyone else work in the wedding industry with event planners? I think they're really going to start to change a lot of how we operate as a business. One of those is Diane Curie. She shared it out. The bride's sister is the host of X Factor in Lebanon. She shared it out to over 1 million people. We gained 4,000 Instagram followers in 12 hours on our own page, and we had 62 wedding inquiries on Monday morning. It was ridiculous. We're still trying to see these people. It's absolutely crazy what it did for our business. So not only did it inspire me as a photographer to push myself forward, to get new images and really push myself in terms of creativity, it did a lot for our business. So the how-to. And I'm going to speak today a little bit about fundamentals because who would agree that sometimes the fundamentals are forgotten? We go to a lot of these events and a lot of people speak and tell you about how inspired they are and how to inspire you and all the rest of it. But I believe the fundamentals in the last few years have been missed completely. And we're all about how amazing we can turn this image afterwards in Photoshop instead of how amazing we can get it in camera to then work on it in Photoshop. And the fundamentals came from my father. My dad was a wedding photographer and was for about 35 years. And he drilled these fundamentals into me. As a 12-year-old kid, I was the most, I don't know how to put this, but I guess Dad was a really tough teacher. He used to not only take me to weddings, but then not give me a camera. It was like the biggest tease in the world. It really was. And for 2 years, I carried a bag and did not touch a camera. And Dad said to me, I'll tell you when it's time. I'll tell you when you can touch a camera and you can take a shot. I said, okay. And he said, all you have to do, Ryan, all I want you to do is look for light. You look for light and you find good light, I'll start to give you a camera. And so could you imagine as a 12-year-old kid, I'm running around a wedding, Dad, there's good light over there. And he'd go, nah, shit. Okay. And he'd say to me, Ryan, look for the pocket of light. The trouble was, Dad never told me what the pocket of light was. He'd say to me, Ryan, you've got to look for that pocket of light. Can you imagine this 12-year-old kid, how confused he was? What's the pocket of light? I don't understand. And I'd ask Dad, what's the pocket of light? He wouldn't tell me. He said, when you find it, you tell me, and then I'll give you a camera. He finally gave me a camera, and he finally let me go out and do some weddings. He'd give me 10 rolls of 120 film. And he'd say, Ryan, you've got 10 shots within this 120 film, 10 frames that you can do anything you want with. But you stuff up any more than that, I'll start to dock your pay. I was scared because I was counting dollars at this stage. And he used to dock me $1 per shot that I stuffed up. Could you imagine that? I didn't want to stuff up any, right? Everyone had to be a winner. So even though I hated my dad for it at 15, 16, now I love him for it because he taught me these fundamentals and a strict regime on how to go out and photograph a wedding. And learning on film was a big part of that. More than that, learning to see good light was the essence of my upbringing, is that it was all about light. I didn't worry about the pose, what the people were doing. Everything was about the light. And unfortunately, that's something I see that is missing in a lot of today's wedding photographs, is that it becomes more about what the people are doing, more about what they're wearing, more about the feeling of the shot rather than the light within it. So if we can perfect both, I think we can come up with a beautiful thing. I'm going to also talk about how to measure good light and a couple of different ways I've come up with doing that. But if you can see good light, I believe you'll always be able to create good light. Because how many of us were taught in a studio? Anyone? Taught in a studio? Yeah, good mark. I was always taught as a natural light photographer, and I always thought it was daunting to go into a studio and then create the light. But actually it was quite easy, because I always knew how to see good light. Creating it was the easy part. I was given the tools to create it. All I had to do is know where to place it. So if you can see good light, you'll always know how to create good light. Let's talk about my favorite source of light is available light, and how I use that available light is to use it as short lighting about 99% of the time. Does everyone understand what I mean by short lighting? I light the shorter side of the face, the shorter side of the body to create that drama, texture, mood, and atmosphere. And what I'm doing is when I'm lighting things like that, I'm actually lighting more for the shadow and looking more for the shadow than I am looking for the light. Does that make sense to everyone? So instead of looking for light, I look for the creation of shadow. The shadow will give me the depth. And I'm not afraid to leave a lot of shadow in my images. I think we're always taught to fill shadows, aren't we? We're always taught to lighting ratios and to fill them up and to make sure it's perfected. But I'm actually not afraid to leave them in there and to give that drama and atmosphere to the shot. In terms of short lighting, my rules are this. You always turn the body away from the light, especially when you're photographing a bride in a white gown. Why do we do that? Texture. You can make them look thinner. Actually, I call it the Ryan Schembri 10-second diet, basically. I can make you lose 20 kilos in 10 seconds. I can just light you properly. But I always turn the body away from the light, the chin back too, and I fall the light off the dress to give that shape and that dimension what I always want to do is make sure the brightest part of my images are always what? The brightest part of the image should always be what? The face. Because that's how we get to connect with the image. So that's where I'm always leading my light into, and the way I do that is to lean the body to the light. I lean the body to the light in order for the face to catch the light first and not the dress first. Because brides in white dresses, they're like a suction for light. They suck up every bit of light possible. So I'll take you through a couple more examples of this. So body away, chin back two. And in that case, I'm actually using the side of the building here as almost a subtracting light to give me more shadow. So again, body away, chin back two. If you remember these formulas, it's so easy to walk into any situation, any lighting situation, and work out exactly where to put people. Because you've just got to remember, I turn the body away and I turn the chin back to the light. So you can pretty well pick any sort of lighting and work with that philosophy. In this case, I was photographing this bride next to a window. The window's here, just off to the left. I then walked around the bride and saw that there was a mirror on the other side of the room. So I didn't move the bride, but all I did is move myself, and I get this. So it's not always changing everything about the image to get a new shot. It could be literally just me walking around and finding a different angle to photograph that on. But I'm still photographing it shadow side, short lighting. Then I brought in the girls just for a bit of fun. Direct sunlight. How many of us are afraid of using direct sunlight? Like 12 o'clock direct sunlight. Only 2 people. So the rest of you are lying? Or? I was petrified. I was taught open shade, head to the shade, head to the shade, head to the shade. Until I started to think, well, why? I could use this direct sunlight and I could use it to create something very interesting and very cool. So the trick to using direct sunlight, especially if you're lighting the person with that light, is to give them an excuse to not be looking at the camera. Because when they look at the camera, what do? They squint. What possibly could we give someone to do in a bride and groom situation, in a couple of situations? What could they possibly be doing in order for them not to be looking at the camera and say for them to be closing their eyes? Look at each other. Maybe. What if they were hugging? Because I don't know about you, but have you ever seen people hug with their eyes open? Looks really weird. Looks so relaxed. I don't know about you, but when I hug my wife, I want to feel that hug. I close my eyes. They could be hugging. I use it in all sorts of different ways, though. With grooms in particular, I'm not afraid of that direct sunlight because it throws a harsher shadow. And grooms can get away with that harsher shadow, like he can. It chisels the face. Again, though, that direct sunlight does something more than just illuminate people. It throws and gives me more drama in the shadow area. So I look purposely for texture in the shadow. And that'll lead me to where I want to go and photograph. So it's always light before location. Always light before location. If you think about where to go and photograph, look at the light first. Light, then location, then pose or structure, then finally emotion, what they're doing, how they're feeling in this shot. The other way I love to use direct sunlight is to use it as a backlight or as a rim light, and then use a fill of some sort, in this case, a white ute that was sitting at the front of his house, to fill the shot. But I use it to give me that beautiful rim light around the boys there. And then I can get away with using that light in a lot of situations. The trick to using that backlight is to make sure the heads are in a darker spot. Okay, so the heads have a darker background behind them in order to give me that separation. if I use a lighter background, what happens? I have no head, yeah? Especially if you're shooting a blonde bride, she then has no head whatsoever, yeah? Or she starts to grow the sun out of her head. That might be a great thing for some people. They might love halos, I don't know. I love that use of backlight. I think it can work really well. As long as I've got enough fill. And fill can come from anywhere. I don't carry a lot of equipment with me, so I'll literally use anything I can. In fact, one day, my brother was with me filming, and he was wearing a white shirt. So I did this shot, I had the backlight, and my brother was filming. I said, Liam, put the camera down. Take your jacket off, and do this. It was a great reflector. I don't know how his back is now. I then start to look through backlight wherever I am, because I love it. I love that interest of that backlight. This is in the reception. Flash. I was just in China, so it's fresh. Use that fresh. I love flash, and I love using flash as a backlight source as well. In fact, I use it a lot with ambient light. So using the flash as a backlight and then bringing an ambient light or an ice light or a tungsten light into that situation to fill. I also love flash to give me that punch, that grit to the image, or give me a little bit more of a fashion feel. I'm not a fashion photographer, I'll never profess to be, but I think it brings that fashion feel to a lot of my wedding images. So in this case, using the sun to highlight the dress, that's what's coming this way, the sun's highlighting the dress. The flash off to the right-hand side there is giving me the beautiful key light to her face and then shaping the rest of it. We've all seen these shots before, right? Yeah? There's 5,500 of them in Facebook, yeah. And actually, if you went to AIPPP last year, there was 4,500 entered in the wedding category, so. It's good. It works. I love it. What I always look for, though, when I'm doing these type of shots is giving the structure to the image. In this case, I'm using the branches of a tree. So I'm lying down on the floor, using the branches of this tree to basically frame what I'm trying to show off in this type, the bride and groom with the church in the background. So I've underexposed the sky by a couple of stops, used the flash as a key light, and used the tree, the canopy, as more of a frame to engulf the shot. So, ice lights. Anyone use an ice light? Yeah. Cool. Anyone know what an ice light is? No? Okay, I'll show you. Ice light or tungsten lighting or just ambient light of any sort, but this is basically an ice light. It was invented by a good friend of mine, and so I do talk about it a lot. But the ice light is basically what we say is a portable window light, okay? It's designed in a cylindrical form, and basically it's like carrying a window wherever I go. I can use it in pretty well every situation. The problem with using any continuous light source or a light that you've introduced to the scenario that isn't natural to be there is that you have to give it the excuse to be in the image. The light has to have an excuse to be in the image. In this case, what I've used to illuminate the bride is the ice light. My assistant is just behind that wall illuminating the bride. The excuse for the ice light to be in the shot is the chandelier. We all know as photographers that light couldn't possibly light the bride inside the room like that, but it's a visual excuse for it to be there. How many of us used video lights when they were all hot and popular? Yeah? Like LOL ID lights and things like that. How many of you saw those type of lights used in the forest at midnight? And you just thought, where is this light coming from? Yeah? We used to call it lighting people's backsides, basically. It was like, la, this light coming out from nowhere. It didn't have a visual excuse to be in the shot. It didn't make sense to the eye. So always when I'm using that type of lighting is looking for the excuse for it to be in the shot. In this case, the guy in this image is actually holding the ice light behind him. The excuse for the ice light is the lamp. Again, we all know that light could not possibly light like that and give that beautiful rim light, but it's a visual excuse. I have the ice light illuminating the bride and groom here. The excuse, these little flecks of light that come into the shot, it's shot through a chandelier. So I've placed my lens into a chandelier to give me that texture and tone to the print. The ice light can have some beautiful ways of using it that don't have to just be a main source of light. This was another ridiculous wedding. If you thought the last one was expensive, this was double the price. Yeah? But you walk into a room like this and you just think, what the hell? How am I meant to photograph this? And literally everyone that walked into that wedding just went like this, huh? What? They're all real. It's all real. It's ridiculous. Amongst this chaos, I somehow had to pop my bride and groom out of the shot. So the groom is holding the ice light behind him, just to give me that little pop of light behind the bride's veil, just so you could see them amongst the $250,000 worth of flowers. It's crazy. I want to know what these people do for a living. It's ridiculous. So that's what I'm looking for in light. And let's talk about how now to measure that good light and how we go about getting it right first time, every time. And there's a couple of little tricks to that. We're going to talk about exposure. And I know it seems really simple to some people, but it's probably a good refresher for most. So that's what I've found by doing these. When we talk about exposure, we talk about ETTR. Has everyone heard of ETTR before? Expose to the right. Exposing to the right. And I'm talking about a histogram now, and how we use that histogram and how we read that histogram becomes very, very important. How to read that light using a light meter. How many of us own a light meter in the room and use it? Mark's still got his hand up, that's good. Don't have to own a light meter. You can use it, there's one in your camera. It's very good as well. But I find it handy to have a light meter with me. That's how I was taught. I'm going to talk about the digital zone system. Has everyone heard of the zone system of exposure before? If anyone went to TAFE or college, you probably were taught it. How many of you actually remember it? Probably a couple. Yeah, that's good. So we're going to translate how that goes into digital. But histograms are the most important thing when it comes to exposure because basically, and I'm sorry, Nikon and every other camera manufacturer, but the back of your camera is that little screen is absolute crap. There is no way that that's an accurate reading of a 14-bit RAW file that I just shot. What is accurate though is the histogram. And so instead of looking at a full image on the back of my screen, I look at a histogram and then I look at an RGB histogram. Is everyone's aware that there's an RGB histogram in your camera functions, and I always leave that on along with highlight alert on, okay? And why I use highlight alert, and that's that little blinking light that comes up, that annoying thing. It does become really annoying. The reason I have that on and then I have my RGB histogram on is that that little blinking light can sometimes lie to you, okay? That little blinking light might be a blue channel that's actually peeking out. And the blue channel in that particular shot might not be important. There might not be much blue in the image. So it might actually be just lying to me. So that's why it's important to have my RGB histogram up as well, and I can see which channel is actually peaking at the top, okay? Because I want to get my exposure to a point all the way to the right without losing too much of the image, okay? So I want to expose to the right without losing too much of my highlights, and I'll explain why in a second. So ETTR, exposing to the right, shooting with a histogram, very, very important. And it's important to know what a histogram is and why it's there and what it all means. We've all seen one before, but maybe I can explain it in a little bit more detail for you. So a histogram reads left to right, shadow, midtone, highlight, and highlight being on the right-hand side. That's why I say expose to the right. We're exposing for our highlights, okay? If anyone's shot transparency film, you're shooting basically in the same way. You're shooting for that highlight as a priority. What that histogram means is basically it's grabbing a grayscale gradation over that histogram and it basically reads like that in those sections. And what we need to know basically is what those sections mean and how much information are in those sections and how our cameras actually capture that information. Are there any JPEG shooters in the room still? Cool, okay. Whew. I don't have to explain that then. Just to take you back a little while, because there were people that shoot JPEG and do it often. To give you an idea of what a JPEG file actually is and how many bit levels how many grayscale levels that has in it, if you get an 8-bit JPEG file, it's basically how to get the gray levels on that is 2 to the power of 8, which is 256 gray levels you have to capture. When we start shooting RAW, we'll start with a 12-bit RAW file, for instance. To get the gray levels in a 12-bit RAW file, 2 to the power of 12, 4,096 gray levels. We can see we've jumped quite a bit, haven't we? Now it's beautiful because we get to shoot in 14-bit. 14-bit's cool because then you go 2 to the power of 14 and you get 16,384 gray levels to photograph with. We've jumped quite a bit, haven't we? Even in 2 bits of information, we've jumped a crap load. And we've got all these beautiful files and gray levels to capture. If you're lucky enough to have a camera that will shoot in 16-bit RAW, like Tony, you'll get 2 to the power of 16, you'll get 65,000 gray levels to shoot with. Seems ridiculous, doesn't it? I think so. That's a lot of gray levels. Let's talk about a 14-bit RAW file, because that's what most of us normal human beings shoot with. So, hey, Tony. 16,384 gray levels. This is how it divides up basically stop by stop. And if you think about stop by stop, what I'm talking about is the dynamic range of a camera. And I'm going to talk about it in about a 6 to 8 stop dynamic range, okay? And if you think about how your camera actually brings those gray levels onto the sensor, the first thing it will capture onto that sensor is what? Anyone? Highlight, your first stop of light. That's the first thing it will capture into that, let's call it a funnel. If we imagine this funnel, the first thing that's filling up that funnel is that first stop of light. And that first stop of light is actually worth half the amount of gray levels that you've got to photograph with, okay? So if we think about the first stop, here's the first stop of light, and it's worth 8,192 gray levels in that, just in that first stop of light. So can you see why I'm pushing you to go and put your exposure up here? Because you've got half of your information in that first stop. In your second stop of light, you've got half of that again. You've got 4,096. In your third stop, you've got 2,048. Now we're getting deep. We're getting into your fifth stop, 1,024. Half of that again, 512. And in shadows, or your last stop of light, you've got 256 gray levels. So if you underexpose an image and you leave your image down in this area of your histogram, what have you done? You've thrown away all of this information. It's not available to you anymore. Does that make sense to everyone? Good. There's nods. There's confused faces. There's nods. That's why I'm pushing you to give me an image up in here, because then we have all these beautiful gray levels to photograph with, and we get it all in there. So the zone system helps us do that. The zone system helps us get to an exposure like that. And using the zone system, it's a simple, effective way, and it was brought to us by Ansel Adams. And it gives us a simple way of measuring light, reading light, and then placing our tones where we actually want them. Because our camera, if we just leave it up to our camera will just put it where it wants. And our cameras, what do they want? What do our cameras want to do to you in exposure? They want to give you everything at 50% grey. Yeah? Grey. Because a camera knows grey. So using this technique, it's a powerful technique that gives you that creative flexibility to, you tell the camera exactly how you want the shot. Now this does work when you shoot manual, and I only shoot manual when I photograph anything I do. And the zone system basically is this. It divides those grey levels, or your histogram, it divides it into 10 sections. Okay? 10 points from shadow to highlight. And what you've got to do is measure where you're putting that exposure. Now, if you think about it, when I photograph a wedding and I'm photographing for a highlight, what is a bright highlight on a wedding day? Anyone? The dress, usually. Yeah, it's usually white. Sometimes not, but usually it's white. And a white in a zone system, or an important highlight with texture and detail, is around about zone 7 to 8. Okay? They're the ones that have the highlight, but they have texture and detail. So they're the ones I'm going to concentrate more on today, is those zones around 7 and 8, because your camera and what your camera will read and give you an exposure reading for is zone 5. It will always measure zone 5. Whether you point it to black or a highlight, it will always come back to zone 5. But if I'm reading something that is a highlight and it's in zone 7, I need to know how to tell the camera that I want it to push to zone 7. Does that making sense to everyone? Good. There's basically what those zones look like. It's more a gradation of tones in a grey scale, and it divides it into those 10 equal parts. I'm going to skip through a little bit. How am I going time, Tone? All right. A single zone, though, if you look at a single zone and you extracted a single zone, that single zone still has gradation to it. It's not just a block of grey. It still has gradation to it. So there still will be fluctuation in terms of where you go with your exposure. Defining all the different zones. I won't go through all of them because this is all available on the internet. Just Google it and you can come up with all of this stuff. But it goes through zone 0 to zone 9, and you'll get all of the different explanations of what each zone means. Like I said, zone 7 and zone 8 are the ones we're going to concentrate on because that's that highlight with important texture and detail. And I'm going to explain how we actually photograph for that. So if we start exposing for highlights and exposing to the right, we're going to push that histogram to the right. We're going to open up our exposure. And we're going to carefully meter a zone 7. An important highlight. We're going to carefully meter that important highlight and note what that meter reading is, okay? So the camera or your light meter is going to give you a reading for that, but again, your camera or light meter is going to read for you what zone 5 is, okay? So even though you've pointed it at zone 7, what you know is zone 7, it's giving you what it thinks it is at zone 5. Now, because zone 7 is 2 stops higher than zone 5, once I get that reading, so I've gotten a reading, it's 2/50th of a second at f4. That's what it's giving me, 2/50th of a second at f4. Because I've pointed it at zone 7 and I know it's a zone 7, what will I do to the camera? Remember, zone 7's brighter. What will I do to the camera reading? So it's 2/50th f4. I would open it up by 2 stops, wouldn't I? And sometimes that doesn't make sense to a lot of people because they think, well, it's brighter, Ryan. Yes, brighter means overexpose it. When it's darker, you underexpose it. Because remember, the camera is giving you what it is at zone 5, okay? So we've metered to zone 7. It's told us what it is, 2/50th of a second, f4. We want to open up by 2 stops. So I bring the camera back to 1/25th of a second at f2.8. I've opened it up, I've overexposed the image. And basically, you want to overexpose it to a point on your histogram where it's all the way to the right without it being clipped right at the very end, okay? I talk about things in stops. Make sure your camera, or you know what a full stop of light is as well, because your camera mostly will go in segments of a third of a stop. So to put that into practice for you, there it is. So I've carefully metered zone 7, which is that bright highlight there on the bride's dress. It's given me 1/25th of a second at f16. That's a lie. It didn't. But that's the graphic that we had. That's what it's giving me for zone 7. What do I have to do that exposure, guys, to bring that exposure back to zone 7? 2 stops. 2 stops. So would it be 1/25th of a second, f8? Okay? That's what it would be. Opened up by 2 stops. So what I want you to remember in general about that, when you're pointing to something lighter and brighter, you overexpose. When you're pointing to something darker and more in a shadow, you underexpose. Yeah? I know that confused the crap out of me for a long time because I would always think if it's brighter, I should bring it back. If it's darker, I should bring it up. No. If it's lighter, I'm going to overexpose. If it's darker, I'm going to underexpose because this theory will work if you point it at a guy's suit and you take the shot at the camera reading, and what does it give you? That black suit? What is the back of the camera saying? Probably mid-grey and washed out. So I then need to underexpose that image in order to bring it back to, say, zone 3. Everyone with me? Is it too early for all this? Good, 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 good. In using this, I know that I don't have to waste time on the day checking the back of my camera for exposure. How many times do we shoot and we check? Let me adjust. Shoot, check again. Yeah, almost. Shoot, check again. I want to break that habit. So I use a light meter. And to be honest, it makes me just look a little bit more fancy. Yeah? I look through my light meter, click. It gives me then the opportunity to stop fluffing around with my camera and engage with my client. Get the pose right, get the story right, get the emotion right. And the last thing I should do is pick up my camera and take the shot. In fact, when you see me shoot, I don't actually hold a camera most of the time. It sounds really weird. I'm a photographer. What do you mean you don't hold a camera? The camera is an annoyance, to be honest. The engagement with my clients and how I talk to them, how I pose them, how I direct them, that's all the important stuff. The final product of all of that is the click of the shutter. And literally, I will shoot, click, done, move on. Next story. Because next story means next album page. Next album page means more money. More money, happy life. Happy life, happy wife. Yeah? In summary of all of that, the way we do that in manual, we always shoot at the lowest ISO practical for the situation that we're in. So I'll always try to shoot at a ISO that is practical for where I am. So I'm not always looking at it and going, okay, I've got light, 100 ISO. I might actually give myself a few more stops in ISO in order to give me flexibility with my shutter speed. I drink way too much coffee, way too much, and I can't shoot anything under 160th of a second. Yeah? So if you hear people say they shoot at a 30th of a second and a 15th handheld, and man, they're legends. Like, give them the Ninja Award, yeah? It's like, sensei, yeah. The solution to all of this, to expose for our highlights. And we will have all of that beautiful information to then play with afterwards. How many of us get our images back on our computer and they all look dark? Does everyone do that? Got them back, loaded them into Lightroom. Oh my God, what happened? They were brighter on my screen, I'm sure. Yeah, your screen lied. Yeah? Check your histogram. Your histogram won't lie, and it'll tell you what the actual truth is. All right, let's talk about posing a little bit. Does anyone know what time I finish? Okay. 4 o'clock? Cool, awesome. Thirsty. Hey? That's to finish, yeah. I will. Actually, can we get our beautiful model up? Come up here, Don. So you're going to help me up a little bit with posing. Yeah? Cool. And I know we worked a little bit yesterday together, so I want you to forget all that stuff. Okay? And just become very limp. Yeah. All right. Take a seat, actually, for now. I'll talk a little bit. Yeah. All right. Posing. Who loves the word pose? No one. Really? You do? It's awesome, isn't it? Yeah? How many of our clients love the word pose? None. Absolutely none. In fact, every bride that walks through my studio says to me, Ryan, I just want everything natural. Just really natural, just like that one on your wall, like that. Just really natural. Yeah. I could see how you could naturally fall down a staircase. That would be amazing. They do, don't they? Yeah? They really don't know what they want. How many of them have done it before? A couple of them. It's actually amazing how many second weddings I've photographed this year. It's a beautiful thing, repeat business, it's great. They want everything natural. So I say to them this, look, if I can help you look the best you're ever going to look, ever, and you won't have to worry about a thing, and you can have total trust in what I'm doing for you will make you look amazing. How does that sound? Oh, yes, Ryan, of course. Of course we want that. But at the same time, I want to give you the excuse to give me a beautiful natural feel through that photograph. How does that sound? Sounds good. That sounds good. How many of your brides, and I said this before, but how many of our brides actually ask us to liquefy their arms? And then how many of them wear strapless gowns? Yeah? Nearly all of them. Nearly all of them. I give them the confidence that I'm looking after them on the day to then tell them, hey, you don't have to worry about a thing. You look amazing. And I will never photograph an ugly shot of you. And I give them the fundamentals of my posing. And I do this with anyone I meet. Any bride, bridesmaids, mother of the bride, anyone that I meet that can benefit from it, and they never forget it. It's amazing. I shoot a lot of weddings where I've shot the sisters' weddings, the cousins, and then they're all in the bridal party, and then it's amazing. I get to the 4th or 5th wedding, and I don't have to say a thing. They all just come in and go, we're ready. It's really cool. All right, so the fundamentals of a pose for me, turning the body away from the light is the first thing. Never shooting anyone square to the camera, okay? It's always that slight turn. Square to the camera, what are you doing? You're broadening, widening, making someone bigger. It's always that slight turn, and it doesn't have to be profile, it's just that slight turn to things that works. And always away from the light. Turning the chin back to the light, because the first point of illumination in any shot should be the face. Feet and leg position. I go through that a little bit and I'm going to explain it to you now. Hips and spine position are really important to all of this, and I've got a couple of tricks that will just make it really easy for you. And the lean to the camera. I'll explain why the lean is so important. And the tilt of the top of the head. All right, so let's do this. So if you actually look, we've got a few diagrams here. You can see flat to the camera. She looks a bit broad, doesn't she? When we turn the body to the light, what happens? We actually make it look bigger again because we're illuminating all the biggest parts of the body. And then finally, turning the body away from the light, we can see that we've just lit the side of the body there. We've thrown the shadow on the other side, and then we've slightly turned the chin back to the light there, but that was more about body position. So, let's do it. See what's here. Okay. So with any, I'm going to get you to do this in a second. I'm going to do it first. So with any, again, bride, bridesmaids, mother of the bride, mother of the groom, anyone I meet, I say this. Girls, what I want you to do, I want you to slightly, at all times, slightly just turn away from me. Never be square onto me. Yeah? Because it's going to, and I say this, it's going to make you look wider. Who wants to hear that? No one. I can tell you that now. So they all do this immediately. Yeah? Slightly. Now what I want you to do with that front toe, I want you to point that front toe to me. And let's say my camera is in this direction. I want you to point that front toe to me. Now your front knee, what I want you to do with your front knee is I want you to cross that front knee over the other knee. And finally, I want you to lean your upper body towards the camera. Do you want to say that again? I do it incredibly well now as well. Turn, point, knee, lean. What have I done? It's created shape. I've also twisted the spine. The spine should never be up and down. The shoulders should never be straight across. Because that gives me that feeling of being a soldier almost, being very up and down and straight. I want to relax it. I want to turn it, point, knee, lean. The other thing I'm doing with the lean is I'm pushing the biggest part of the body away from the camera, making it appear smaller. Does it make sense to everyone? Yeah? So if they can remember that, you'll save yourself a lot of time. In fact, I did it once with a mother of the bride. I'll never forget this because it was the most hilarious thing I've ever seen. I told the mother of the bride during the day and she did it and she was perfect. She was great. Then I'm at the reception later and I'm grabbing a drink and she was having a drink with a friend and she saw me. She saw me walk past and she literally stopped what she was doing and did this. How do I look? I said, you look amazing, but I haven't got a camera. She goes, it's okay. People want to feel amazing, don't they? Yeah? So you tell them they look amazing, they look amazing. The other part we get to is arms and hands. Anyone having trouble posing hands and arms and things like that? Anyone? The rest of you lying? Yeah? I hate hands. Hands are the most annoying thing in the world to photograph. Would you agree? Like, they're so bulky and clumsy and this and yeah? Arms especially. I have a trick with arms. I say to my bridesmaids, mothers of brides, all that sort of thing. I say, listen, do me a favor. With your elbows, make sure your elbows are always behind your waist. So if you try to do it for me, bring your elbows behind your waist. So where your elbows are behind your waist, try touching the side of your body. Do I look like a bird? Yeah. You can't do it. Your elbows are behind your waist. You can't touch the side of your body. What happens when the arm touches the side of the body? It grows. Now, if you're photographing me, I want you to do that. You make sure that my arms are on my body and then I'm bulking them up even more. But with most people, pushing their elbows behind their waist will open up that gap and never be able to touch the side of the body. So elbows behind the waist. The other thing's hands and where we place hands. If they're not holding something or someone, it becomes very awkward. Now, how many of us revert back to this? Yeah? I just put your hands on your hips, because that's what I saw in Vogue. Do you know what you're doing when you do that to someone? Hi, here's how wide my hips are. Welcome to my hip size. Even worse, when they put them around their waist here. Hi, welcome to how much my girth is. Yeah? Look at my girth. You're drawing, hands will draw attention to the area you put them in. Does that make sense? So if you remember that, hands will draw attention to the area you put them in. Posing hands is a finesse on its own. And Dad, he was a stickler with hands. He always used to say to me, Ryan, the hands, the fingers, the hands, the fingers. Oh, it's like 14 years old, that's all I heard. Ryan, the hands, the hands, the hands. All right, Dad. I got the point. I do this with a lot of people because a lot of people get very stiff with their hands and how they do them. Do this for me, guys. Put your hands out in front of you. Clench. And squeeze some more. And then let go of it all. Oh, yeah, it feels good, huh? That's basically how hands should be posed at all times. So we can grab this hand now and we can do anything we want with it. It's a good trick just to let go of that bit of energy. So, all right, darling, so actually hop up for me and go on the stage. We'll get you on the stage now. All right, so we're going to try this. If you have problems in telling people how to pose, the best way to do it for them. Get them to mirror you, mirror what you're doing, and it will make a lot more sense. So, here's what I do. Stay like that. Just turn this way. There we go. Okay. So you're flat onto them. You can turn your feet as well. It's much more comfortable. Yep. All right. And then I want you to slightly turn away from them. So turn to the right. You can move your feet as well. It's way more comfy. There you go. And I want you to point that front toe to the audience. Let me see. Come back a bit. Okay. Ready? Turn. Point. Knee. Lean. Chin up. Turn your chin this way for me. Beautiful. So let's say, for instance, the light is coming across. Then look at this. It's bright. So we're going to throw the light that way. That's basically the fundamental of every pose that I do. Whether a couple are together or they're not, it doesn't matter. That's the fundamental of where I start from, okay? The arms, what I want you to do, just with your elbows, go behind your waist. And then you're like, yeah, hello. So what I want you to do with your hands, just bring your hands to your waist here. That's it. And I want you to bring them up. What I want you to do, with your fingertips, I want you to feel your thighs. Just with your fingertips, up, 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 there, stop. Did you notice the terminology I used? With your fingertips, I want you to feel not feel yourself, feel your thighs, yeah? It makes everything much softer. If I ask the bride to be touching the groom's face, I don't say grab his face, because what does she do when she grabs his face? Ugh. With your fingertips, I want you to feel his jawline. So it can be in the terminology that we actually say something to how it actually comes out. Does that make sense? Tone is really important because who's ever tried to photograph someone, a couple together, and just their tone has been off? They want a bit of energy, or they want something soft and moody, and their tone's been a little bit off. It might be that you're photographing a bride and groom together, and you want something to be very sensual, you want something to be very soft, and you're like, all right, guys, all right, do me a favor, look at each other like you love each other. And they do this. Okay. Or do you say this? Guys, what I want you to do, I want you to come so close that you feel each other's breath. Yeah. What if you should follow it up by saying, I hope you had a mint. Yeah? And if you wanted something a little bit fun, a little bit more energy, would you say it like, all right, guys, crack up now. All right, laugh now. Yes. Great success. Yes. Or would you play with it a bit? I often, if I want my brides and grooms closer, actually, darling, you can take a seat for now. Thank you so much. Well done. If I want my brides and grooms closer, and in particular, their heads closer, because their heads tell me how much they like each other. And even when I'm doing group shots, when people's heads are separated, it tells me that they're a little bit afraid of each other. Or when a bride and groom's heads are here and here, it kind of tells me that they don't like each other. When people's heads are connected, it brings that connection to the shot. So what I say to them, if I want them looking at the camera, but I want their heads together, guys, lean forward. And this is where the lean becomes really important. Because as you lean, heads can come closer together because the body's not in the way. If you tried to do that with them standing up and you said, guys, get your heads closer, they'll do this. Yeah? Touch temples. Okay. Or do me a favor, lean forward, touch temples. It makes it so much easier. So even in all my group shots, if you saw my group shots uncropped, without me cropping out all the awkwardness of the bottom half of the shot, they would look something like this. They are leaning that much in order to get their heads closer together. If I'm after that emotion, that connection between people, I might say to the groom, instead of look at each other, because how often do we hear that? Guys, look at each other like you love each other. And they do this, because they're trying to focus on each other. I don't want them focused on each other, I want them close. What I want you to do, mate, is I want you to sniff her cheek. Sniff her cheek. Sounds really weird, doesn't it? Don't snort, sniff, yeah? It brings them closer. I then want him to play a little bit with her ear, just to get a little bit of excitement to the shot. So I might say something like this, mate, while you're there, go back towards the ear. Get closer, breathe in it. Permission to bite, suck, lick, go hard. And you imagine what can come from all that. So it can be all in the tone. When I'm photographing groups together to get more connection, more energy, do I say to my groups, and I hear this all too often, in a group shot, you're photographing the bridal party, or mums and dads and bride and groom. Guys, I want you to talk to each other, because that'll look relaxed and natural. Because people stand in the line and talk to each other all the time. You haven't seen that? I don't think I've ever seen that in real life. Have you ever lined up with someone and be like, okay, let's line up here and let's talk. Hey, how are you? Good. Or you get the opposite effect and they go, what do we talk about? What do you mean, what do you talk about? Your family. Talk. I don't use that anymore. I used to. I don't use that anymore. What I say, let's say I'm photographing mum, dad, and the bride. Mum, dad, and the bride. I focus the energy of the people in the shot to one person. I focus all the energy to one person. So I might say to the bride and mum, girls, what I want you to do, without moving too much, I want you to show me how much love you can give to dad. What does show me how much love you can give mean? Or give a bit of love to dad. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. It could mean several different things. They could go in for a kiss, they could hug, they could cry. In fact, sometimes I ask mum for a single teardrop just to, and I get that reaction. Just a single teardrop now, mum, would be perfect. It would be an award-winning shot. What are you talking about? It's all in the tone of how we say things to get that out of them. So you've got to come up with your own ways. I remember I learn a lot. One of my best friends, Jerry Giannis. Everyone heard of Jerry? Yeah? And it's not Giannis, it's Giannis. I used to go to weddings with Jerry, and Jerry would get away with saying some of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard said to a bride and groom. And they would crack up laughing, and he'd get these amazing images, and I'd be like, oh my God, next week I'm going to kill my wedding, man. I'm going to use that line. And I remember this one time, Jerry, he said to a bride and groom, he goes, guys, go for a kiss. And they went for a kiss, they went. And he said to the groom, nah, man, what are you doing? Let me show you. You can imagine that reaction came back. Do you know what I thought? I was 16 at the time. Do you know what I thought to myself? Next week, I'm going to try it. So I went to this wedding. All right, guys, go for a kiss. No, man. Let me show you how it's done. The guy looked at me like he was going to kill me. I just went, what happened? Jerry got away with it last one. What can't? It didn't sound good coming from my mouth. I couldn't get away with what Jerry was saying. I had to very quickly learn that the hard way. Yeah. So if I can say anything, is that make sure it sounds like it's natural for you to say. If that makes sense, yeah? So if it's natural for you to do, then do it. If it's not natural, then you'll come off just looking second rate. I'm going to talk a little bit about hand positions and why hand positions are so important. If we look at how hands are posed, there's a couple of fundamental things that we should never do with hands and bodies and stuff like that. If we look at how a wrist is, we should really never photograph the front of a hand because that's its broadest part. Would you agree? So we can never photograph here, but we can photograph that part. And we can photograph that part, but we can't photograph it like that. Same with pushing the wrist out. If I push my wrist out, does it look bigger? Does it look more awkward than me doing this? Yeah? So there's a few things. You look at that, that's wrong because we've got the wrist pushed forwards towards the camera to make it appear bigger. Let's try something else. Well, let's fix the wrist position, but then what have we done here? Is we've covered the fingers. And that's another no-no because you look like you're amputated and you've got no fingers. So the fix to all of this, soften the wrist, soften the fingers, and get something that looks a little bit more like that. So now we get those beautiful soft fingers and we have still the curve in the wrist. And that's what it's really all about. If you saw just how that pose works in terms of turning, point, knee, lean, it's all about that S-curve. Take that same philosophy and put it into hands and wrists and you'll save yourself a lot of troubles. When brides and grooms hug, let's pretend my right hand is my bride and my left arm is my groom's. When they do it, do most brides do this? It goes right underneath and they amputate themselves at the wrist. Would you agree? The first thing I do is pull it out. Pull the hand out and bring it onto the arm. The second thing they'll do is do this, around that way. What I ask them to do is grab the inside of his arm. It turns the wrist in. So just to grab the inside of the arm, it turns the wrist in. It makes it a lot easier. Guys, I could go on about hands for about 4 days. I literally could. So we just wrote a book about it. We did. We wrote a posing book, and Rocco and I wrote it last year, actually. So, and you can actually buy it. It's an ebook, Refining the Pose in the Art of Direction. Tanya is here somewhere. She was. There she is. Hey, Tan. Tanya has all the information about it, guys. If you're interested, we've got a lot of other products and things, but Tanya knows a lot more than I do all about it, but we thought we'd tell you about it. Composition and crop. How am I doing? I really don't know what time I end, so. Thank you. Okay. Okay, good. I know I might be rushing a little bit, but I wanted to throw out as much information as I possibly could. So bear with me. And if you've got any other questions, we'll go through it. All right, composition and crop, which is really important when it comes to this in-camera artistry, getting things right of the camera, straight out of the camera. Obviously using our rule of thirds, we all know about rules of thirds and where heads should sit within rules of thirds. If we look at our rules of thirds, we're looking at the crosshair, the cross of that rule, the cross of that third, to where we place the heads within the frame. Okay, so it's always at that intersecting point is where I place the heads. Negative space, if we use negative space within an image, negative space should always be to the shadow side of someone. Does that make sense to you? So if you use negative space on the shadow side, not on the brighter side. What does bringing negative space on the brighter side do to an image? It brings your eye to that part. It doesn't actually bring your eye into the important part of the image. The important part of the image should be the brightest part, should be the face. So if I use negative space, it's always on the shadow side of someone. These are just basic rules, just to keep in the back of your brain. So if you're ever looking at it and going, I want to use negative space here, not sure where to use it, look for the shadow. I'll put the negative space on that shadow side. Placing heads into darker backgrounds when using backlight. That becomes really important as well, and I'll show you a few examples. And never cropping through a joint of someone. So, if I'm posing and I'm looking at where my crop points are, let's start with a hand. A hand is either in the shot or it's not in the shot at all. You can't crop here, 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 or at the elbow. You can crop here, but once you've cropped there and you want to go further down, you either leave it in or you're up here. Same with feet. If you're cropping feet, I don't know how many times I've seen this, and at some awards where I've seen people's feet cropped off an image through the ankle. You can't even crop here. You can't crop at the knee. You can crop up here, but never below that. You either crop there or you leave it in. Okay? It's a rule that I live in. So I can crop here because that's the thinnest point of my legs, here. But as soon as I crop through a joint, I have no leg. As soon as I crop down here, I have no feet or an ankle. And as soon as I crop there, it's just, not on. When I crop the body, I can't crop through my waist. Why? It's the biggest part of my body, and I'm telling someone where my body might not end, and it might explode out after that. It may explode, who knows? But I can crop here, because that's the thinner part. And I can crop just below the bust line. I can't crop through a bust though, because then they may explode as well, depending. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah? If I'm cropping a face, actually I crop faces a lot. I crop a face a lot, but I never crop through a limb. I never crop through an eye, a nose, or a mouth. And that's where tilting the head can come in really important, because as soon as I tilt, you can crop me there, you can crop all of that eye out, but you've left my nose, my entire nose, and my entire mouth. You can't crop through my nose, and you can't crop through my mouth, because you're not telling me where it ends. And I might have a massive left-hand side of my nose. I might. Looking at that negative space rule, leaving the negative space on the shadow side, it just feels better. If I crop this, let's crop it and let's put the negative space, even though there's not much in that shot now, but the negative space is still on that brighter side. Do you feel cramped? Do you feel like your eye is constantly going up, out in this way? Does that feel better? My eye now can read it and can read through the shot. It leads me into the image. Let's talk about placing heads into darker parts of the background. I recently started to experiment with throwing light into the lens, but then forgot my rule about placing heads into darker parts of the background. And then I ended up with this. Looks like she had a massive head, like that just exploded from that point. When we leave a darker part of the background, use that same backlight, we then get this separation come out in that shot. So always looking for where I can place the heads within the image. If I'm using backlight, I'm always looking for that darker spot to photograph into. I had a mental shift because I've talked a lot about the technicality of getting it right in camera, but then there's one last part. Would you agree? There's one last part that we need to bring to an image. And I had this mental shift a few years ago with my work. My work was always about me as a photographer. It was always about my next AIPP image. It was. I'm not lying about this. I could go out to weddings thinking of my next AIPP shot and shooting for it. It didn't really have anything to do with the client. And it wasn't until I got married that I realized the importance of what we do. Because my mum got breast cancer the week after my wedding. Well, she was diagnosed with breast cancer the week after my wedding. Those wedding photographs I have are the last photographs of my mum looking the way I remember my mum. Because things have changed. She's still with us, thank goodness. But things have changed. Chemo, hair, body changes, mastectomies, the rest of it. They've changed. So those wedding photos, the last thing that I have, I remember of my mum and how my mum was. It became quite important. All of the shots that Jerry did of the two of us that were these grand landscapes with, you know, us in it and beautiful things, I could care less. I could really care less. The shots of my mum, the shots of my grandparents, and the shots of my family meant the most. The shots that I was in love with. And I found this quote that summed it up pretty well. When we can create a product that touches people's hearts, the possibilities are then endless. Would you agree? Do you know who said that? Think of a product that you really love, that you probably have on you right now. Yeah, Steve Jobs. He does it, doesn't he? Well, he did it. He created products. How many of you talk about loving your iPhone? When you think about it, you probably do, because it's in all their marketing. When you create a product that touches a person's heart, the possibilities are endless, and trust me, they are. Because my wedding album is not full of shots of us looking glamorous and all the rest of it. My wedding album is full of family and full of moments that I love and I want to remember. I took that new philosophy into everything that I do now, into every bit of work that I do. And yes, I want things to look glamorous. Yes, I want things to be perfected out of the camera. But the only thing that will beat perfection is what? Emotion. And the only thing that will beat emotion is when perfection and emotion are combined. And that is my new philosophy. Perfect the shot, but bring the emotion. Then the possibilities are really endless, because people start buying that stuff. I wanted to know how to evoke and predict certain emotions, because there are certain things, especially at a wedding, on a wedding day, that we can predict what will happen. We know the groom will look nervous before the bride walks down the aisle. We know the mother and the father of the bride will have that emotional feeling just before the daughter leaves the house. What I need to do as a wedding photographer is give those people an excuse to feel that moment and show it to me. Because not everyone just falls glamorously and cries and laughs and gives us all the joy. They're nervous, especially on a wedding. They are nervous. I need to bring that excuse. I need to give them that excuse to show that to me so I can capture it. So in me hiding in the bushes, being a ninja photographer and waiting for that perfect emotional shot to appear in front of my camera, and I'm the luckiest person in the whole world, is never going to happen. Would you agree? It may. And there may be opportunities through a wedding to get images like that. But I challenge you to how many of those great images you will actually get. If you are the best photojournalist photographer in the world, and you shot a wedding one day, and you were challenged to get as many amazing shots as possible through that day, how many do you think you would come back with? 12? 20? 40? And I say this to my clients. I say, if I got 12 amazing shots like that with me hiding in the bushes being a ninja, I'd be wrapped. I would. I'd be over the world. I would call myself the best PJ photographer in the world. That's what I would do. I say to them though, how would you like 500? How would you like 500 of those moments that I can give to you? I've never had anyone say no. No, Ryan, it's fine. 12 will do. Really, that's all I need. I'm only spending $500,000 today, but I only need 12 shots. It's never going to happen. Of course they want 500. So give it to them. Give them the excuse to give you that emotion. Sometimes like that. I've done this a lot recently, and it's, I don't know, something's come over me in terms of like mums and dads especially. Maybe it's, I had a daughter, and I'm starting to think about 20 years' time, what I'm going to feel. Yeah? So I've been doing a lot of things where I'm bringing dads into these shots and giving them the excuse to just let go. Show me what you're feeling. And I literally say that to them beforehand. I pull them aside, I grab them, and they haven't seen their daughter dressed yet. I say, in a second, I'm going to invite you into the room. What I want you to do is show me how you feel. Trust me, I've broken the biggest, burliest, macho guys around into tears. I remember this one dad, he was literally smashing like a 6-pack of VB before I went to, I was like, yeah, mate, nah, we'll be all right. And it'd be sweet as, mate. Oh, you don't expect me to cry or anything, do you? I said, I don't know, man. If you want to, go for it. Nah, mate. When do I cry? I'll just go in and hold my beer. Yeah, hold your beer, man. Go for it. No, I don't care. He broke down like a baby. He did. All because I said to him, show me. Show me how you feel. I asked for it. Is that so bad? Is it really bad that I asked? Does anyone feel guilty? I don't. Are you kidding? They're going to buy more album pages. They buy more album pages, more money, happy wife, happy life. Yeah, it's good. Ask and you shall receive is my point. Don't sit there waiting for it to happen. Ask for it. There are opportunities, and I know this better than anyone. There are opportunities where you can't ask for things. Can you imagine through the church and the minister's doing his thing, and I just go up to the car, hey guys, look, you look really bored, all right? So do me a favor, look like you're actually enjoying this thing, and then we'll get some great images, all right? Sorry, mate. Yeah, continue. You're right. Okay. I know better than anyone that there are moments through a wedding that you can't ask, that you have to wait. But I'm saying, for the other 17 hours of that day that you're on the wedding, ask. Ask for something to happen. Give them the excuse to bring that to the image. And it will happen. Trust me. I'm out of range. There's a couple of different shots in here. I can't remember what's in here, actually. Okay. This is one of those shots where I said to the bride, darling, just give mum as much love as you can. And that's what she did to give as much love. Is it perfect in pose, the elbows coming out, everything? I don't care. The lighting's good, it's there, and I've got that feeling, I've got that emotion. And these are images that I want to fill wedding albums up with. I think these are the ones that give it that feeling and give it that sense of it's theirs. I want to give them images where they can't hear me saying to them, guys, I want you to look at each other and look like you love each other and kiss now. Because that's what people remember of those images. When they look back at them, they remember the photographer saying, kiss. They remember the photographer saying, look at each other. They remember the photographer saying, talk to each other. I give them the excuse to do something, but then make it their own. Make it their own. I said to these guys, what I want you to do, just with your chins and your lips, show me how much love you have for each other. All she would remember is his scratchy beard in that one. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how I see things a bit differently. Sometimes I think I'm a little bit special, not in a good way, because I see reflections in pretty well anything. In fact, the top of the chairs you're actually sitting on, there's a reflection in it, and I'm actually really tempted to take a photograph because I can see that it's beveled. That's how special I think I am, not in a good way. I see these things because my clients don't see them. And I want to give them something that they can't see. I want to give them something that gives the shot something else. So let's start with this one. I saw this print on the wall, and it's a beautiful landscape. It's really lovely. What I did is I decided I can see myself in that. And if I turn off all the lights in the room, and I light the groom, I'll be able to use that print as a texture to the actual photograph. As a texture to the portrait of the groom. So instead of adding a texture afterwards, I wanted to do it in camera. I wanted to show the groom, hey mate, your wife made a good choice and this is why you're spending all that money, okay? It's important to prove yourself as soon as you get there. So what I did, I shot into this. Oh, I'm out of range. I lit the groom, ice light, barn doors, sexy assistant, and I get this. It's probably a bit hard to see in here. But you see the texture? And trust me, more of it's there. Yeah. Who sees these at weddings? Who sees these at weddings and goes, wouldn't that be amazing to shoot through? Or is it just me? Thanks for making me feel weird. So I shot through those little ball things, backlit the bride and groom. I wanted to see something, and trust me, when you start turning the camera around and you have images like these, people freak out. People literally freak out. It's probably my favorite one, because this is the one that got me that in-camera artistry award. And it was really interesting listening to them judge this print, because they couldn't work out if it was Photoshop, if it was this. It's like, it's a raw file. How can it be Photoshop? I can't believe you're discussing that right now. What I saw in the bride's room is I saw this mirrored cabinet and the bevel. Does everyone see that bevel right in the corner there? And I do this a lot now. I use a macro lens, so 100mm macro lens, and I come as close to that bevel as possible. I place my bride in the right light, and I'm photographing her reflection in that bevel. I get this. So that is literally the raw image, guys. So I have double, and you would have noticed in my slideshow before I had a few other examples of that. So I want to see this stuff because my clients don't see it, and then they start to appreciate what I do more for them. All right, I'm almost there. Let's take you through these, and I'm going to show you just one more slideshow as well, and then we'll finish up. So, guys, if you don't know, Rocco and I, we're not only good friends, but we actually educate together, and we've done a few really cool things. We shot 2 weddings together, one in Sydney and then one in Barcelona in Spain, and then we had them filmed, because people would ask us, can we come to a wedding with you? And we're like, we can't have 35 people at a wedding. How about we just film it and then let you watch like you're a virtual assistant? So that's what we called it. We called it the virtual assistant. And if you wanted to know a bit more about it, Tanya, again, will let you know everything that you need to know. But basically, it's a downloadable movie, 2 hours. We also have our Photoshop Actions and Lightroom presets. Again, this wasn't a Photoshop bashing session. It was to tell you that get things right in camera, perfect them, imagine what you can then do with them afterwards would be amazing. So, of course, we love Photoshop. If you don't know who Rocco is and what he does, he's a master printer. He's someone that knows Photoshop better than most people in the country. So, our ebook, the art of the pose and the art of direction pose. I wanted to thank a couple of people. So one's my wife, because she lets me come and do these things. And literally, I actually live on the Gold Coast now. Most of my work is in Sydney, so I'm on a plane twice a week. Because I fly down on a Friday, shoot weddings, fly back on a Sunday night. And the other one's my little daughter, because she just continually rings me and goes, where's Daddy? So, but I figure I'm working hard now and it'll all pay off at some point, so hopefully. I wanted to share with you a wedding that we did in Barcelona in Spain. And we entered this album thinking we don't want to actually do too much to all of these images. We pretty well want to have them just straight out of the camera and show you what we can do. So we actually entered this one to WPPI, but I thought it would be a cool thing to show you guys. So I'll do this. I'll finish on one note, and then if there's any questions, we'll go from there.
Oh
All right, one more slide, because I have 3 words that I live by, and so much so that I had them tattooed to me. So, strength, passion, and honesty. And I take that now into everything that I do. I am passionate about educating people, and more on a fundamental side than anything else. And I'm passionate about actually being a wedding photographer at the moment, because I love it. And I think we need to love it, right? And we need to push forward. And we need to be doing different stuff and inspiring people all over the world. Because let me tell you, we lead this field around the world when it comes to wedding photography. We're often in the States and through Europe, and a lot of what is being done over there is influenced by things that happen here in our own country, and we shouldn't take it for granted. There are an incredible amount of talent in this country, and it should be shared. And I thank you for coming to events like these, because it keeps it supported and keeps us coming here and educating. So I thank you guys so much, and I hope you enjoy.
I was just watching you thinking the student becomes a teacher.
Oh, well, yes.
Seriously.
Yeah, thank
seriously.
you.
I remember, as I said, Senior's a younger kid, and look at him now. And not just coming here teaching us, but as I said, Ryan shares his knowledge all over the world. The other thing that strikes me was the full circle. There'll be people in this room that would be quite pleased to see that someone who came through as a young gun and is now matured into a full-blown international professional is up here talking about the fact that you still got to get it right. And the opportunity to prove that you don't need to know Photoshop, but also you stand there and you love Photoshop as well. And I've seen what you're capable of. You're a very talented retoucher, but you've also shown that the craft of working with the camera, in the camera, the skill that a lot of the people that were there last night were talking in the corners about, the old craft of photography is alive and well. But more importantly, it's the foundation for whatever you want to do, even today. So, Ryan, that was a very good presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers. Appreciate it.
In fact, it was a bit unfair to say it was very good. It was actually brilliant. It truly was. It truly was.
I appreciate it.
Do we have any questions for? Yeah, give him another one. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I was actually a little shocked. I didn't realise that was your first national presentation.
Yeah, I know.
Because I've seen you speak in so many places, and when you said
all
that,
overseas.
I don't think it'll be your last. Now, is there any questions? We've got about 2 minutes because Ryan finished pretty much spot on. But if there is, I'll take 2 questions if there are. They'll have to be quick though. One at the back. Yep.
Yeah. They do. Yes, they have to be. I've had 4 weddings this year where they've taken out the part in my contract to I can't advertise, I can't Instagram, Facebook, anything with their wedding shots. And they're the bigger weddings, put it that way. They just don't want it out there, which I respect as well. It's totally fine by me. I have plenty of weddings that I can share, so yeah.
For those who couldn't hear, the question was that does Ryan get permission to hashtag SOOC? And of course he does.
Yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
And we'll take one more question.
Yep.
Mr. Burt.
Right, we've kind of seen almost a circular where technology and the extra creative options now have almost been a distraction to core photography. And we're coming back to the values that what you were talking about today.
I hope so.
Thank you.
No problem.
Where do we go from here?
We rebuild. Yeah. I think that's, I see that as the major problem at the moment, is that we've lost all these amazing photographers. They've moved on, they've retired. There's a lack, it's just my personal opinion, but I think there's a lack of that core foundation at the moment. It's all about to me it seems like, how famous can I get on Instagram? How well known can I get in a matter of about 3 seconds? How many filters can I throw on this print before it's ruined? And most of them are just ruined. So to me, there's nothing like seeing a great photograph. And I had this discussion with Dad the other day because I was talking to him. I said, Dad, a lot of people are going back to shoot film. And he goes, yeah, I've seen it. That's not film. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, Ryan, do you ever remember film looking like that? He said film had a quality to it that you couldn't match. You would look at these 50 by 60 inch canvas that Dad used to do off his blad, and you could touch every pore, and it was just had that certain quality and to it. But now he said it just looks like it's been washed through too much developer and then been left out in the sun for about 4 weeks. And he said, you know, it's a style, it's a fad, and these things are going to come in and out, but as long as you still know how to photograph, you'll be right. And I think he's right. He has a very, I guess, this overview at the moment because he is retired and he can just sit back and watch, and he just gives it to me straight. He just said, you know, just look after what you do day to day and you'll be okay. So I said, okay. Don't worry too much about all the fads. That was his point. But I think, where do we go? I think we rebuild first, and then we have lots of amazing creative brains in this country, and I think it will explode again. It is exciting, absolutely, absolutely. But it's been a while since I've seen that resurgence, that real push in creativity, especially within the wedding field. You know, 10 years ago, we would all go to WPPI, and Tony, you would remember this. We were doing something so different to what they were doing over there, that they were all like, what do you mean you take wedding photos like this and you have hours with your brides and grooms? And it was all new, it was all very exciting. And now it's kind of plateaued. So I think it just needs a bit of a reboot, and we'll see. We'll see.
And there's one thing you said that I'd like to not correct you, but you said, you know, we had those great photographers of the past, and, you know, we need to get that back. And what we need to be proud of in this country is that if you take the top 10 wedding photographers in the world, arguably half of them are from Australia. And we need to be very proud of that.
Absolutely.
You know, with Jerry Gionis and Yervin and Rocco, yourself, a couple of others that you could put into that. And then you look at some of the young guns coming through. Last year was a watershed moment when James Simmons won the Australian Photographer of the Year as a wedding photographer.
Amazing.
I think they're here. I think they're here. And with more people like yourself up here showing the values of foundation photography, but also the opportunity to use the new tools and new skills, the future's bright. But we do as Australians need to be very proud because we are well respected on the world stage.
I think where I was going that more, like my first talk that I ever went to was Monty Zucker.
Yeah.
And he did an entire talk for 2 hours on fingers. It was amazing. It was brilliant. Like Monty would tell you where to put a fingernail. Like ridiculous stuff, you know. But I think in an education platform, if we can have more of that, I think it'd be great.
Yeah, well, with more people like you around, Ryan, I'm sure it's going to happen. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to again thank Ryan Schembri.
Thank you.